Dr. Arlene Drake, welcome to Shrink Wrap Radio.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here.
Well, I'm so happy to have this opportunity to speak with you. Uh, we've been trying off and on, and we
Yeah.
finally are connected here. And I'm
I,
happy to have a chance to talk to you about your wonderful new book called Carefrontation,
yes.
Breaking Free from Childhood Trauma. How did you come to write this book?
Well, after doing this kind of work for about 35 years, um,
Okay.
people have asked me if I had a book out, and I didn't. And I'm not really a writer, so it took me a long time. I just decided I would put together the work I do because
Mm-hmm.
the work I do is unique. I have a definite roadmap to how I get people from victimhood to thriving, and I graduate people from individual and group therapy. So I did decide to write it, and this way other therapists and people who want to read this as a self-help book can use this to guide themselves to the place where they can finally live a full whole life.
Right. Well, how did you come to be interested in trauma, in childhood trauma, sexual trauma specifically? And I'll be so bold as to ask you, are you a survivor of that yourself?
Well, yes.
Okay, so maybe that's got something to do with
Right.
why
Right.
you've specialized in it, huh?
Right. I
Okay.
yes, I think that many years ago, I happened to do some work with a therapist who was starting groups doing this kind of work, and it really intrigued me because there really wasn't anyone else who was doing this. So, in fact, they didn't really teach it in school at that time. So I decided that I would look into it more and more, and decided that of course really spoke to my heart,
Sure.
and I decided that I really wanted to get involved with it. And back then, David, people thought that maybe there was 1 in 10,000 girls who'd been sexually abused, which of course that's not true. Uh,
Yeah, it's fascinating that synchronistically now we're hearing about all of this
oh,
abuse of power in Hollywood and in the government, right?
I know, I know. Well, people don't realize. I think this is society's dirty kept secret. It's just been it runs all through socioeconomic classes and whatever, whether it's government, whether it's teaching, whether it's the Catholic Church,
Yeah.
whether it's show business. It all washes out the same. They are all abusing people and
Okay.
children, which is
Yeah.
really, I work with adult survivors of childhood abuse, whether it's sexual, physical, or emotional.
Okay. Well, as we discuss the various stages of treatment as we kind of go through your book, I hope you'll feel free to throw in any case examples that come to mind. I know you've got some cases in the book, uh, but anything that comes to mind, people love stories, right?
I
So,
know, I know.
yeah, that helps them to listen and to relate. Well, let's start with the title, the main title, Carefrontation.
Right.
Um, what were you getting at with that title?
Well, when part of my process is to have my people um, confront their perpetrators and their family, because until you can really talk about it from an adult standpoint, you're always viewing that individual from the eyes of a child, and that keeps you a victim. But the word confrontation sounds a bit harsh.
Uh-huh.
So I decided carefrontation would be good, because the reason I have people do this is because if they care enough about a relationship with somebody, it really is to heal what's gone down, what's happened in the family or what's happened in the past. So this is not something where I'm going to get in and punch you out. It's something where because I care, I'd like to talk to you about this and see if we can't build a bridge and have some kind of a relationship.
Okay. Yeah, because to me, the word confrontation, I thought it was interesting. I wasn't sure if it meant ultimately confronting the abuser or not, but it seemed to me
Yes.
that it possibly had multiple meanings. one of which is confronting themselves with the truth of what
Well,
happened in their past.
of course, I'm sorry. That's the obvious one, and that's true. We have to carefront ourselves with the truth, and most of us don't. We only want to see so much of the truth. The whole truth is usually very difficult to look at. But until we could carefront ourselves with the whole truth of all of this, all of our life, and everything that happened, and who was responsible, and who protected us and who didn't protect us, we're not going to get very far because we keep defending ourselves and everybody else, and you can't go far doing that.
Well, I hear another meaning in there as you say that, unless we can carefront ourselves. So I'm hearing that as to confront the truth, but with some caring
Yes,
rather than self blame
right, right,
or horrendous guilt, etc.
right. It's to look at the truth of the matter, because until you have the real truth, how can you do anything to rectify it? You can't rectify a half truth because it's like having the evidence. You can't find what you're looking for with half of the evidence. You really need to allow the whole truth to come through.
Yeah. Now you said that you don't that writing the book was difficult for you because you're not a writer, but
Right.
I have to tell you there's no sense of you're not being a writer as I read your book. In
Well, thank
fact,
you.
it's a very powerful book because it's written in a powerful way. And again, I come to the idea of confrontation.
Right.
I mean, there's sort of a no nonsense tone in it.
Right. Well, that's how I do my therapy, because too many times people who've been abused as children, and I get a lot of people who've been in therapy for 15 or 20 years, but they haven't come to a place where they've had resolution and peace inside of them. And I think that's because they haven't been guided in a way and pushed in a way that they need to be to get to the next steps. Um, and I am sort of no nonsense. It's sort of like tough love. I love
Hmm.
them and I push them, because if I just sat there and say it doesn't do them any good.
Right.
You know?
Well, yeah. Well, that really comes through in the book,
Yeah,
and yet it's as I say, it's no nonsense. It's with strength,
yeah,
uh, uh, and so it feels very that it would be very effective. And I do get a sense that would be how you would be in a session with someone. And
yes.
yeah, yeah.
I
So
don't
that's
let them. I won't let them keep lying to themselves, because that's what they've done the whole time, and they've kept making excuses for their perpetrators and people who were supposed to protect them, because none of us want to blame people we love.
right,
On the
right.
other hand, I don't really call it blaming. I understand we don't like to blame, but I really say, when this happened when you were a child, and my question is, who is responsible for you then? Usually, an adult is responsible for the child.
Right.
So we have to look at it as, whose responsibility was it to take care of you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when
Sure.
they get that, it's a little easier, rather than to say, I blame my mother, I blame my uncle, I blame. No, whose responsibility was it to protect you and keep you safe?
Okay. Now, are we talking only about childhood sexual trauma, or
No,
are we also including other sorts of trauma that you work with, and what would
others.
those be?
Well, it could be emotional abuse, it could be physical abuse. Um, Many times there's a lot of emotional abuse in the home, and people don't realize how traumatic and how that affects one's life. But if you're living in a home where you're constantly being berated, or put down, or called names, that has a lot of effect on us when we grow up. We may think sticks and stones don't hurt our bones, but names will never hurt. But names really stick to our heart, and we carry that with us. And so that's a really big problem, because we tend to, as children, we end up believing what the adults call us, and that could really significantly destroy our lives.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you note that many of the abused who come into therapy with you seem to minimize the impact of
Yes.
their early childhood negative experiences. What's that about? Are they repressing these, or are they in denial, or what?
I think part of it is they're in denial. It may be too painful to look at. Also, if you look at something from the adult you are today, you think, well, it wasn't that bad. But when you put yourself in the shoes of that child and you think of a big person standing over you yelling or hitting you, that's a different story because you're not the adult you are today. You were a little one. And you've got to, I ask people to get pictures of themselves when they were the ages they were abused. And when
Hmm.
you look at those pictures, David, you could see the innocence and the powerlessness of a child and how big an adult is compared to a child. And eventually I get them to see that of course, from where we are today, we're thinking in adult terms and we think, well, maybe it wasn't that bad. But I say to them, if it wasn't that bad, then why are we here? You know?
Yeah,
Because,
well, one of the things I wanted to ask you, and I think maybe you just answered it, was how do you break through that denial, since they have this tendency to to minimize it, and it's kind of paradoxical that they're coming in because they're in some kind of pain, and
right,
at the same time, then they're minimizing it.
right, right. I I have to keep working with them, and first of all, I have them bring in pictures when they were young, and ask what was going on in their lives then. Start telling me the story. What did they remember was happening? What was going on in their homes? You know, some people have watched their father beat their mother or the parents yell and scream and throw things at each other and call them names. So, and when they look at that picture and realize how big the household was compared to them, they start to understand that perhaps that was hurtful to them. And that is why they're in my office.
Yeah, and you write that the scars of their early abuse, the in quote scars, not
Right,
literal physical
right,
scars, but emotional scars, are somehow there in the room with you, such that you can call their attention to them.
right.
Can you give an example of that?
Well, you know, if it were really over, if it, you know, well, that was a long time ago and that's over. When we look at their pictures and we start talking about certain incidents, if it were over, they wouldn't start crying. They wouldn't get a feeling of, oh my God, you know. But if it's here, it's not over.
Yeah, some of the people who come to you, I think I'm kind of remembering one of the cases. They might be a very successful businessman,
Oh,
and
yes.
so they counter this by saying, "Look, I'm doing really well in my life. You know,
Right,
I've got this job, and I'm making a
right,
lot of money, and I've got a sports car, and they'll
right,
cite all of these external things.
right,
But then, as you push further, you discover that well, maybe they are in relationships that are unsatisfying or that don't
right.
last.
Something is hurting inside, David. I had a young man come to me, and he sat down and he put his head in his hands and started crying. And he said to me, "I have everything and I have nothing." And he had gotten to a place where his career was gangbusters. It was everything he wanted. And all of a sudden, there was a hole in his heart, and he started feeling these feelings.
Hmm.
And that was very interesting. So once he got what he wanted in the outside world, everything sort of came rushing up from him of all of the
Interesting.
feelings. Yeah, it was
Interesting.
very interesting.
Yeah. Is it even possible to suffer abuse as a child and not carry it with you into adulthood?
I personally don't think it's possible. No,
Hmm.
even if you don't remember, because that unconscious is constantly working inside of us and pushing us to do certain things and avoiding certain things, and it's interesting the way the unconscious works. You know, it's like people will say, well, I don't know why I can't be close to someone. I mean, everything was fine, or my home life, I forgot all about that. But the unconscious knows. You know, what child, what part of your unconscious would like to be in an intimate relationship if your first intimate relationship is at home with your parents? You may want an intimate relationship, but that child inside us says, no, 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 I've been here. I don't need that. I don't want to get hurt. So,
Yeah, much of what you do in your work is to address the inner child.
right, I do.
And that concept of the inner child has been around for some time now
I know.
in a variety of therapeutic approaches. So, what's
I
different
know.
about your use of that notion?
Well, David, I don't just use it a couple of times. This is a constant. I actually want my client, to build a relationship with that inner child, not just do a visualization or talk to it once, but start really building a relationship. So we
Hmm.
start with pictures of when they were young and things first happened, and looking at that picture. And I start with asking. I do a lot of right hand, left hand writing, dominant and non-dominant. And the non-dominant hand is really the key to the unconscious. So, in fact, a lot of the newer trauma therapists are saying that unless the information and feelings are coming from that child, it's only the adult reporting it, and it doesn't really take it where it needs to go. It doesn't take it out of them. So, well, I have,
It's just from the surface, their
yes,
conscious
right,
mind,
no,
but not the deep
right.
stuff.
It's like I could say to you, well, David, what does the ocean look like? And you could say, well, it's vast, it's blue, it's got waves, different color blues in different places, but that's only the surface. If you went deep sea diving, you would find all kinds of worlds down there, and that's what we have to
Mm,
do to really get to the heart of the matter here.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And you mentioned that. Well, one of the distinctive things about your work is the right-left that you just mentioned, the
Yes,
drawing with the non-dominant hand,
right.
writing with a non-dominant
Yes.
hand.
Oh,
And do you really see, uh, because I've not tried this with myself or other people, do you really see a distinct difference?
it's an amazing difference. Even my clients, at first, they say, "Oh, this is silly," or "This is hokey," or whatever.
Hmm.
And the first few times they do it, they may say, "Oh, well, I thought I knew what I was saying." But eventually, when that starts becoming part of their homework, they things will come up and they'll say, "Oh my God, I wrote something, and when I went to read it, I had forgotten that, or I didn't realize how it hurt me." And it's just amazing what it brings up.
Yeah, yeah. I can barely write with my right hand with my dominant
Me
hand.
too.
But maybe I could print. I'm not sure I could do cursive with the
But
non-dominant
it doesn't
hand.
have to be a lot of writing. Sometimes a few words are as powerful as many sentences, and we don't need a lot.
Yeah,
Eventually, though, people do start writing more, which is quite interesting.
yeah. Now, someone might ask you, why go back and revisit the inner child when the outer adult is the one that's in pain right now?
Well, because that pain is coming from somewhere, and if you don't get to the root of it, see, most of my people who've been in therapy for 15 or 20 years come in and they say, I know my story. I know everything. I know this. I know that. Fine. They do know everything. But what happened? They know everything and nothing has changed. And
Hmm.
that's a problem. So what they know up here is not what they feel in here. And it's my job to get the two together. And that's why I do this work this way. I have to get them to meet. Otherwise, what they know here doesn't change anything inside. And that's the problem. People, with all of their knowledge, can't make changes. And they don't know really what's keeping them. They want to make changes, and they don't know what's keeping them.
Yeah. And you're trying to help them get their quote story out. And this would
Right.
be the story
The abuse.
of the abuse
Yes. And
from the
also,
perspective of the child.
child. Also, if a child, so it's more than, so we get the story out, and it's like interviewing the child to find out, well, how did you feel about that? When that was happening at home, what were you feeling? Um, and then to help the adult part grow and be a good parent. Because if you have a scared child inside of you, David, somebody's going to have to embrace that child and say, I'm here now. I have you. Don't worry. I'm going to protect you. And that's what I do. I have that adult become the good adult, the good parent, so that child doesn't feel afraid anymore. And when
Yeah.
that child isn't afraid anymore, there's more freedom in the adult's life.
Well, you're getting down into what might be called a kind of primal level with them of feeling and so on. And I could imagine that sometimes really powerful emotions might come up that could potentially feel overwhelming to them or re-traumatizing to them. How do
Right.
you deal? How do you contain those feelings
Well,
or teach them to contain them?
I teach them to be that good parent because people who come into my office um, are high functioning usually, and
Mm.
they have a good mind. They know how to take care of business. They know how to take care of things, and most of them would be able to babysit for your kid. So they have what it takes to take care of that child, but nobody's taught them that, and that's what I have to teach them. Um, I think I go about this in a manner where I have that adult first of all, I have them write a commitment letter to that child. I asked them to write, well, what did you want to hear growing up? A lot of people wanted to hear from their parents. I commit to seeing you, to hearing you, to protecting you, to guiding you, those simple things. And nobody really did that for them. And many children go about, never being heard and seen. So I have the adult write that letter to their child. And then we go about how are we going to do it? How do you hear that inner child? How do you see that child?
Do you have them write it in the session or as homework?
No, it's homework.
Okay.
Homework is the important. So I give homework every week because it really keeps them on focus. It keeps them moving. Many times, if there's no homework and it's just talk about what you want the next session, people veer off and talk about who knows what because they'd like to avoid what they're in there for. You've
Yeah,
seen that.
yeah. Yeah, I know what you're saying is true. I mean, I was a therapist for many years
Yes,
and experienced a lot of what you're talking about, and
right.
particularly that the importance of finding a way to keep people on point and on the edge. And I think that's a great idea, what you're doing, this homework as a tool to guarantee that that happens.
Right. So the homework is very important. So I have them write letters to the child. I have them ask a child, when that was happening to you, what were you feeling? And what happened next? And what happened then when you went to school that day? Just really starting to question that child because the child doesn't know anybody's there and cares about them. But if that adult could be there, ask them the questions the parents never did and be there for them to say that, okay, I hear that really hurt you, but I want you to know now I'm here and I have your back. It's really important.
Do you have them do any work with the child in the moment, or do you try to talk to the child in the moment, a la maybe Gestalt therapy?
A little
Where
bit.
to, yeah,
Yes,
talk
yes.
about that a little bit.
Well, sometimes I'd have them say, okay, now, what I'd say to them, okay, close your eyes. Where do you see your child right now? Could be, well, one woman said, I see her in a corner and it's very dark. Okay, how old is she? About 5 or 7. And what is she doing there? She was just beaten and nobody's around. And what does she need right now? She needs to be held, the person might say. She needs someone. I say, okay, go over there and take that child and hold her and let her know that you're here for her now. And that will never happen again. She will never be alone in that corner because you see her and you hear her. So that is really important to follow through with these things.
Okay. And another thing that you do is you ask them to protect that inner child by
Yes,
taking a break from their abuser. What's that
yes.
about? Tell us.
Well, and I usually parents, even if somebody is molested by or beaten by somebody outside of the parental home, it's a parent's job to know what's going on with their child and protect them. So the parent failed to do their job when that didn't happen, when they didn't notice that this child had any symptoms of being abused and they let it go on. So I usually want them to talk to their parents about what happened, not right away, but so first of all, ask them to take at least a 3-month break from their family of origin. This way, they need the perspective to work on themselves because with that distance, they could be more in tune with themselves instead of always being pulled into the family and wanting to please the family and then forgetting why what they're working on. It's too tempting to wanting to make everything okay with the family if we continue to see them. So we need to get a physical distance for emotional healing. And that's even physical distance is even from the phone because, we could talk on the phone and we're dragged right back in there.
What if those people are no longer around? What if they're dead or something like that?
Well, then we can't do that.
No, you can't do that. But I suppose you could do it maybe in fantasy or
We
something.
do it, but we do confront it in letters. And there's always somebody around that should have done something, it seems like.
Hmm.
You know?
Other relatives or
Yeah, somebody who was always
family,
there.
friends.
Right,
Yeah.
right,
Interesting.
somebody
Yeah.
whose job it was to help that kid and failed. So there's always a way, and even if the perpetrators are no longer with us, I have people that the perpetrator is not there, but we work it out because everything eventually, people don't necessarily change. They may carefront their parents, and some parents, and I tell the parents, I usually have the parents in the room with me. We set up a time and have those parents come into the room. They fly from all over to meet with me and their adult child, and their parents are really, most parents seem to be grateful to have an opportunity to heal something because they didn't know what was keeping their adult child away from them. They knew something was wrong, but nobody ever could talk about it.
Hmm. Well, I'm thinking, well, if it was like really sexual abuse, like by a father or
Right,
a grandfather or an
right.
uncle, that person's going to fly across the country to have this
Well,
wound opened up.
I have had, I did have, yes, I've had a couple of people, but one person denied it and denied it, but the woman's mother remembered something,
Hmm.
and and then my client told him to get out, and another person said yes, he did it, and I was ruining their holidays and got up and walked out. It's amazing what people do. But
You were ruining his holiday.
ruining the family's holiday. But at least the daughter got to see. I mean, this man just felt righteous in what he did. And with somebody like that, no matter how much a daughter or son tries to be better or do something to win that parent over, that parent is not going to change or not going to really care about that child. And that's sad.
I think the fact that you are willing to uh, be a party in that, to invite the parents or whoever to come and be in the session,
Yes,
communicates, I would think it would communicate a lot of caretaking to your client, that you
yes,
are willing to be there with them in that place that was so scary when they were growing up.
I am. And I think it's important because somebody has to be their Indian guide to get them out of there. And I
Hmm.
have a path, and I tell them just pretend you're lost in the jungle. I'm flying over in a helicopter, and I'm going to say, okay, stop. All right, now go right a little bit. Okay, okay. Now I'm going to give the directions because it's difficult to get out of that jungle without somebody giving you the directions.
Uh-huh. And you've been there as a victim yourself.
Right.
Do you ever share that with them or not?
I might say that it did happen to me, but I don't share my story.
Hmm. Okay. But at least letting them know that you know what you're talking about from up in that helicopter,
Right. Right.
based on your own real lived
Right.
experience.
And I know how to get somebody to the other side. That's for sure.
Yeah,
And I really am proud of that.
yeah, yeah. Well, you should be. Uh, how do you keep them from getting stuck in victimhood? Poor me, we can kind of there's some gratifications from
Yes.
that position.
Yes.
How do you deal with that?
Well, sometimes what I do is I the there's a letter I do have them write. If I give up being a victim, what will happen to me? What will I lose? And then they look at me and say, "Oh, I'm not going to lose anything." But when they write that letter, they see what they're going to lose. They're going to lose a lot of things. They're going
Such
to lose
as,
they're going to lose their excuse for certain things. They're going to lose their just being sad and wanting everyone else to take care of them. Because you've got it. The adult person that you've become has got to be the person that's going to take care of that kid. You can't pass it off to all your friends or someone you married.
yeah, there's
You
a
know?
whole nother kettle of fish.
Oh, yes, another kettle of fish for sure.
Yeah.
So we
You
look at
you
that.
also
I'm sorry.
no,
Go
you go
ahead.
ahead.
No, we do look at that, and I think the way I have the homework going, that they don't really stay in that very long.
Uh-huh. And also, you do something around allies. You have them call on allies. How do you do that part of the process?
Yes, there's we always have allies. Well, most of us have some allies in our life, whether it was a parent or a best friend or an aunt. And I think it's important to see who was there for you and what did they do. They may not have gotten you out of the situation, but what did they do that helped you to get through it? And now how, and taking some of that advice of what they did, how do you help now? How do you help that inner child get through it?
Hmm.
Because thank God that a lot of us have had some allies to give us a sense of maybe we are okay, maybe we're worth saving.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So these allies are real people. I was
Right.
imagining that they might be uh, inner personifications of.
No, not necessarily. And
Mhm.
then if it's in group therapy, which I love, and I think it's very dynamic, and it has people feel less lonesome and not isolated, and it also helps them break down those feelings of something is bad, they're bad, or something is wrong with them. It really is a very healing way of working, and the group becomes the good enough family to support that person.
Hmm.
Now, we can't do the work for them, but we could be there and witness and support them.
I'm under the impression that there's not as much group therapy around as there used to be. Do you
Yeah,
have can you validate that at all or
yes, I
not?
can. I don't, right, there isn't. I don't know where to send somebody for group, actually. Um, no, there isn't,
And
which
yet
is,
it's such a powerful modality. I mean, I know other people say that as well.
it's so powerful. It really is. But I don't know. I don't know if we've gotten away from that and into individual more. I don't really understand what happened.
Uh-huh.
Did you do
Okay.
group when you were practicing?
I'm trying to remember. I did a lot of group work, but it was not in a therapy. It wasn't group therapy for the most part. It was encounter groups and so on, going
Oh,
back to
okay.
the 60s, 70s. Uh, I'm sure I must have been in graduate school involved in some group work, group therapy, but
Yes.
it's not coming back to me.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
in a group work, it's wonderful because I graduate people. My groups are ongoing. So as I graduate people, I bring a new person in. And what's beautiful about that is that the new person could see where other people are in their recovery from this. And I can't tell you how many times I hear how much hope that some member in the group has given them. Boy, if a member of the group says, I felt just like you when I came in. I didn't want to do inner child, and I was scared, and I was whatever. And that really helps the new person. And they could also see where that person who's been in group a while, where they hear where they've come from, and they can see where they are. And that's it's very empowering and gives them a lot of courage to move forward.
Yeah, yeah, I've seen that happen in other kinds of groups, so
Yeah, it's
I know
wonderful.
that to be true.
Yeah.
One of the things that you write about is the fantasy of dramatic rescue. kind of rescue from without. Tell
Right.
us what you're getting at, and how does that manifest itself, and how do you work with that?
I think that we all want some men or women, we all want somebody to come into our life and make it okay. Somebody that's going to use their magic wand or something and just make us all okay, and we won't have these bad feelings, and life is going to be perfect, and whew, and everything is great. But the truth is, we're the only ones that could make life okay for us. And until we realize that, that's when we stay in victimhood, waiting for Prince Charming or Princess Charming. We're going to be a victim because they can't save us. They might add to our life, but they are not going to save us, and
Yeah.
we'll end up hating that person for not saving us. So I always say that we've got to do it ourselves. We've got to be our own Prince Charming or Princess Charming, and we've got to be the one to be there. And and as I teach them how to be a good parent to this inner child, that's what they're learning. They're learning that they are the ones doing this, and they could see that how their strength has gotten more and more as they do this work. They could see how they're making better decisions. They could see how they're able to comfort themselves more. They could see how they start to honor themselves instead of just blaming like they did. And they could finally see that it wasn't their fault.
Yeah, I can share with you my own personal story about that fantasy of a dramatic rescue. I didn't grow up with my biological father, and I had lots of fantasies about him. And then, I think it was in my early 30s, through a marvelous chain of synchronistic experiences, I found my real father
Hmm.
living not far away from where I lived after we'd both been all over the country and all. And uh, my mother sent me a letter that somebody sent her saying, "Yes, of course I know where he is, and here's the address," and so on. And it was like this little 3-year-old inside me of
Right,
my daddy. And,
right,
and he's going to be rich and powerful, and he's going to solve, I'm a married
right,
man at this point, and, I have all the challenges of young adulthood and family building and so on. And here's this sort of upwelling of hope and
right, right,
magical relief,
right,
release.
right.
So I
That's
can
right.
really relate to that stage of it.
Yeah, I think we all have that. In fact, some people, even if they have a mother or father, say to me, "Well, I used to pretend that I was born in the wrong family and that my mom or dad would come
Yeah,
and get me one day, and I'd wait in
right.
the yard, because things were really rough at home. But nobody's going to come and get us. We've got to do
Yeah,
it. We've got to be our own hero. And the truth is, we're capable of doing that.
yeah, yeah. And you mentioned that you do find yourself working with patients for whom other approaches haven't worked.
Yes, because a lot of people do come to me after 20 years of therapy, and they know everything. They know a lot. They could write a psychology book, but they say nothing has changed inside.
That's got to be so gratifying for you
It is. It's very
that
great.
you've got your hands around a powerful intervention that can really help people.
Yes, yes. And I'll tell you, if I didn't have this, when I graduate people, that's the biggest gift I get doing this work. To see
Mm.
somebody graduate and go on their own and just be able to take on the world as the person they were meant to be. Now, it doesn't mean life is perfect, but it means they trust themselves. It means they trust what they're thinking and feeling, and it means that they're going to make good decisions for themselves. And that's really important.
There's a lot of discussion of termination is a technical term that people talk
I
about.
know. Sounds bad. I don't
It
want to
sounds
be
like getting bumped off.
right, right, right. I do
Yeah, so
graduation.
it's interesting that you're talking about graduation. And
Right.
so, do you have a formal
I
ritual around
do.
that, or do they
I,
suggest it? Do you suggest it? How does that come about?
I do. I have a formal ritual that starts uh, about 5 weeks before the person is going to graduate. First, we determine if they're going to graduate. And usually people know, and I know, everybody knows, you get a feeling if somebody wants to graduate to get out of group, that's not going to happen because we all know. it's sort of a synchronistic thing. People are in tune with each other. And when somebody's ready, people are in tune with that too. I have a process of writing letters to wrap up from where they are now, because a letter to their aggressor or perpetrator is from where they are today is going to be much different than that first letter from the child. And I have them write letters to certain key people from where they are today. And it's really an amazing journey that you remember their first letters and where they are today, where they are no longer the victim of what happened. And the letters, the only criteria I had is that they are not a victim in the letters. And that's how it works out. And it's really great. And then I have a whole graduation ceremony and a little graduation certificate. It's great. I love it. It's my favorite. Yeah. It's my favorite. And we have a party.
I'll bet it is. Do you do anything like that? I gather you see individuals as well as the group work.
Right.
And do you do the graduation with
Yes, I do.
individuals?
Yes, I have the same process, and we go through the same process. I have my diploma, and we do that whole thing. And it puts a nice closing. It's a wonderful graduation to graduate into a better life, and having acknowledged. One of the things is in therapy we don't get to acknowledge what body of work we've done, and this really acknowledges a beautiful body of work that the person has done.
Mm-hmm. Lovely. And as you mentioned, your book is written as a self-help book,
Right.
but at the same time you counsel people in the book. Don't try to do this all on your own.
Right.
You must find somebody who will work with you on this. You can find a therapist somewhere.
Right.
Share the book with them. Are other therapists going to be willing to bend themselves to your process?
I hope so, because it's nothing that they couldn't do. People know inner child work. I think this will just help them and give them a roadmap. I would hope
think this book is 2017, right? It's just recently come out.
Yes.
So you don't have any feedback yet.
No feedback yet.
Yeah. Well,
I'd like to get some.
Yeah. Okay, world. I would expect that you'll get really good feedback, I have to
Thank
say.
you.
Yeah, I felt like, reading it, wow, this is really something powerful that you've got here. Are you doing any training of other therapists?
I haven't started doing that yet. I might do that.
I would encourage you to do that. I really think you have something
that
people could benefit from. And
yes.
I would really encourage you to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you should be. Well, I don't want to tear you away from the good work that you're doing.
No, I know.
With individuals, but I could see you, traveling the world. Like we know so many people are out there offering trainings and workshops and all.
Right.
And your book persuades me that you're as worthy as anybody to do that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm going to look into that, I think.
Yeah, good.
But it's all just happened, and I've just been on a busy track right now. But I'd like to do that, actually.
Yeah, well, let me know how that goes for you.
I will. Thank you.
So I've kind of gone through the stuff that I wanted to touch on. I wonder if there's anything that we haven't said here that you'd like to get into the interview.
I don't think so. I just think that, if we're true to ourselves, we're going to have a much better life.
Okay, well, that's a good note to wrap it up on.
Yeah.
Dr. Arlene Drake, I really want to thank you for being my guest today on Shrink Wrap Radio.
Thank you, David. I loved it. Thank you so much.